welcome to Between the Lines, where we discuss and dig into what's said, what's heard, and perhaps we'll get to what's true. I'm Steve Lombardo, your host and the CEO of Adfero, and today we are very fortunate to have with us Katty Kay. You are the special correspondent for BBC Studios. You're an MSNBC contributor on Morning Joe quite often, and co-host of The Rest is Politics, a U.S. podcast with former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. Well, let's talk a little bit about how the media has changed and is changing. How do you think news outlets are adapting, if you will, to the real-time social media influencers that are driving coverage?
All big media organizations are struggling. What's the financing now that we've lost our ad revenue? That's been going on for a while, but not many of them have really responded adequately to it, I think, on a financial footing. But also, how do we get audiences' attention when we really have to fight for that attention? Before, I think that attention was a given, right? If you were the New York Times or you were CBS News or you were the BBC, people came to you. That's where they came to their news. But now they have hundreds of different news sources, some of which are verified and some of which are not verified online. Right. And we can't just say, well, we are the BBC or we are MSNBC. We know and we have editorial protocols and people will respect that. You still have to meet audiences where they are. The BBC actually launched about a year ago something called BBC Verify, where we literally go through video and say, okay, we're going to go back through the provenance of this piece of video to show you that we know that this was Ukraine and we know that this was a Russian drone that hit this place and we've geolocated it and we've looked at the weather. And so you're trying to show the audience, look, what you are seeing on our website is, you can trust it, because we're going to show you how we get. You're
showing your homework.
We're showing your homework.
Tell me a little bit about the work with the BBC that inspired your video series, which is Influential with Katty Kay. How did that come about and how's it doing? How's it going? You enjoying it?
I love that series because I wanted something that was a bit not politics. I mean, the world is pretty grim right at the moment. I mean, inflation, AI, misinformation, disinformation, wars around the world. We haven't got to climate change, right? Throw that in, and no wonder we're all feeling pretty stressed out.
Sure, and then talking to Hugh Bonneville about is a lot more fun, isn't it?
And talking to Hugh Bonneville or Vera Wang or Otto Lengi, and I love to cook. I mean, just Winston Marsalis. I mean, it gives me a chance to talk to people who have achieved amazing things in the world of arts. That is just not political. I mean, that's my dessert. That's my ice cream with my spinach.
What I love about it, it's really informal.
Yeah, super. And I think we were talking about media. I do think that is another way that media has changed since I was growing up, but even in the last 5 years, there is an absolute demand for informality. People want real people, not scripted.
Well, because it's more authentic, right?
It's more authentic.
And so that's something that we wrote about and talked about here at Adfero, was this idea that too often, we've put such an emphasis on media training of executives or leaders that they become so stiff. They have the messages down, but they sound rote and they feel inauthentic. And so what we've been now talking about is, just being honest, upfront, casual. Let people know a little bit about who you are and what you believe in. It goes a long way, doesn't it?
I think it's even more than that, though. I mean, I think I'll go back to the political sphere because that's the area I know, and let's talk about the last election. I think one of the problems that Kamala Harris had was that she was a hyper-cautious politician in an era that doesn't tolerate caution. So there was a lot of push. Why doesn't she go on the Joe Rogan show? And I was one of those saying, actually, I think it would be great, she should go on the Joe Rogan show. And I think I was wrong, because I think she would have gone on it and tried to be that cautious politician. And you can't. Right. And so what would have happened, exactly what you're finding with executives, she'd have tried to go on and she would have come across as inauthentic, because she'd have gone on a show like that trying to be casual and informal and throw caution to the wind and say things that were maybe not 100% verified, right. But it wouldn't work for her. If it doesn't come naturally to you, it's very hard to copy.
You're also co-author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, but the ones that I have listed here are Womenomics and Confidence Code.
Yeah, so this was a book, Steve, that we wrote, started researching in 2014. And we wrote it because we'd written a previous book about the value of women in the workforce. And we'd interviewed a ton of women in very senior positions. And often we'd ask them, how did you get to where you got to? And those women would say to us, well, I was lucky, or I was in the right place at the right time, which is another way of saying I was lucky. And we'd interviewed men too, and we never heard men say that. And so we thought, well, that's odd. Why are the women attributing their success to something outside of themselves? And there's actually a psychological term for this. It's called external attribution, we then learned. But we started digging into this idea of confidence. Was there a difference in confidence between men and women when it comes to the workplace? And we found that there is a significant gap. It's well documented. And it's interesting because women don't have it outside of the workplace. Our research showed that confidence is almost as important factor when it comes to success as competence is. So we wanted to try and see what we could do to close that gap.
Let's back up a little bit. You were born in the UK but traveled a lot as a young person. Your father was a diplomat?
That's right.
How does that international background that you bring influence the way you cover business, politics in America today? Does it help you in any way, do you think, in explaining the issues that are going on or helping people to understand those issues in a different way?
I lived in Africa, I grew up in the Middle East, I lived in Japan for 3 years, I've lived in Europe. I think I bring to my understanding of America's role in the world a kind of an almost intuitive global perspective. I can't get rid of it, it's just there.
Yeah. You did all of that, and your first job out of school was a job at a bank.
Yeah.
What's that about?
What's that about? Well, you know me well, so you're wondering. I left university with this lovely but slightly useless degree in medieval and French and Italian literature. Having traveled all my childhood in the Middle East, I thought I wanted to do a job that would have me carrying on traveling. And so I actually thought if I went to the Bank of England, they would make me financially literate at least, and then I could go and do a master's in development economics and carry on traveling. And after a year, they hated me almost as much as I hated them. So it was time to leave. And I went and got a job with an aid agency in Zimbabwe. And a friend of mine then came out while I was working there, who was a journalist, and said, there are so many great stories here, you should be telling them. And he brought me out a little tape recorder and literally said, this is the record button.
Who has been your favorite person to interview and why? The most memorable interview you've had in your entire career?
I interviewed a couple who run the biggest Trump merchandise store in America, in Arizona. They were delightful. They have a huge big cardboard cutout of Donald Trump that retails for $100 if you want one, but they can't keep it in stock, it's so popular. And at the end of the interview, they explained to me why civil war was going to come to America. But they did it with a smile.
Fascinating.
It was the best interviews are not the politicians, they're the voters.
What I've always loved about your work is that you have an acute understanding of what's going on. You've spent a lot of time traveling this country, trying to understand what people really feel. What they think, but what they feel. What's happening today that you're seeing that's not being reported enough that'll have an impact in 2026?
The phrase that most resonates with me in terms of traveling around the country and what I hear from people is affordability. That I think actually, and behind affordability, I would almost say the single biggest factor will be housing. I mean, that sounds really boring as an election issue, but I think the housing crisis, particularly for younger Americans, when they're looking at rents that are 6x income, not 2x income, which
Sure.
they were when we were growing up,
right.
is producing a massive amount of dissatisfaction. Throw into that a crisis around jobs and entry-level jobs.
And AI now.
And AI taking some of those jobs. I think that is going to be the 2028 election. Affordability, but really around issues that young people have on affordability, and that seems to be housing and jobs.
If you could interview anyone, living or dead, I love this question, who would it be and why?
Nelson Mandela, who I think is the most admirable politician, certainly of my lifetime, but almost of any time.
Terrific. Hey, Katty Kay, thank you so much for doing this. I've known you for such a long time. I'm so thrilled that you became a guest of ours.
Thank you. Thank you.